It's September 24th, 1877, a hillside outside Kagoshima, Japan. The air is hot and still. On one side, 30,000 Imperial soldiers, modern rifles, artillery, endless ammunition, the full force of a newly industrialized nation. On the other side, 500 men, exhausted, wounded, some of them fighting with swords because they've run out of bullets. They haven't slept properly in days. Their leader sits among them, bleeding from a bullet wound to the hip. He has been offered terms of surrender multiple times. Each time, he refused. He knows what comes next, and he chose it anyway. His name was Saigō Takamori, and the most extraordinary thing about this story isn't how he died. It's what he built, and why he chose to destroy it. To understand why Saigō Takamori ended up on that hillside, you need to understand who he was before it. Because Saigō wasn't some relic of the old world, fighting desperately to hold on. He wasn't a feudal lord clinging to his castle. He was one of the men who built the new Japan. Born in 1828 in the Satsuma domain in southern Kyushu, Saigō came from a low-ranking samurai family. Not wealthy, not powerful, but from an early age, people noticed something about him. He wasn't the most refined man in the room. He wasn't the most polished speaker. But when he spoke, people followed. He was physically imposing, unusually tall and broad for the era. But it wasn't just his size. There was something about his presence, a kind of moral gravity that made people want to stand behind him. By his 40s, Saigō had become one of the most powerful men in Japan, a key architect of the Meiji Restoration of 1868. This was the revolution that ended 265 years of rule by the Tokugawa shogunate and restored the emperor to power. This was the defining moment of 19th century Japan. The country that had been sealed off from the world for centuries, suddenly, violently, opening its eyes. Saigō was one of the men who made it happen. He sat at the top of the new government. He was celebrated, honored, revered. And then he watched everything he fought for get twisted into something he didn't recognize. The Meiji government moved fast, brutally fast. Within just a few years, Japan was transforming at a pace the world had rarely seen. Western technology, Western institutions, Western military organization, railroads, telegraphs, a conscript army. And here's the thing, Saigō wasn't opposed to modernization. He understood the necessity of it. Japan had seen what Western powers had done to China. He knew the country had to adapt or be colonized. But there's a difference between adapting and erasing yourself entirely. Because in the rush to build a new Japan, the Meiji government began systematically dismantling the samurai class, the very people who had bled to put them in power. In 1871, hereditary samurai stipends were slashed. In 1873, a conscript army of commoners replaced the warrior class. In 1876, the Haitore Edict, samurai were banned from wearing their swords in public. Think about what that meant. For 6 centuries, the sword had been the physical symbol of the samurai's identity, honor, and place in the world. And the government Saigō helped create, just banned it, by decree. Saigō had fought for a restoration of Japanese values. What he got instead was a government that was replacing those values wholesale with Western ones. The samurai, once the backbone of Japanese society, were being made obsolete, discarded, humiliated. He resigned from the government in 1873 after losing a political battle. He went home to Satsuma, and he started teaching. He opened a network of private military academies across the region, training thousands of young samurai who had nowhere to go, no lord to serve, no role in the new Japan. He wasn't planning a rebellion, not yet, but he was gathering men who were angry, and he was the only person they trusted. The government in Tokyo was watching Saigō nervously, a beloved national hero living quietly in the south, surrounded by tens of thousands of trained, armed, deeply resentful samurai. That's not a situation you sleep easily with. So in January 1877, the government made a decision. They sent agents to Satsuma, secretly, to raid Saigō's weapons stores, remove the ammunition, neutralize the threat before it became a problem. It backfired spectacularly. Saigō's young students found out, and before anyone could stop them, they raided the arsenal themselves. The rebellion had started. Not on Saigō's order, not on his timeline. Started by furious young men acting in his name, before he'd made any decision at all. When he was told what had happened, he was reportedly furious. Then he was quiet for a long moment. And then he said, "I cannot suppress my own men. I will go with them and die." 6 words that sealed his fate. He put on his uniform, he strapped on his sword, and he marched south. What followed was the largest armed uprising in Meiji Japan, the Satsuma Rebellion. Saigō's force peaked at around 40,000 men, trained samurai warriors, many of them elite fighters who had spent their entire lives mastering the blade. They were disciplined, ferocious, and fighting for something they believed in with everything they had. But the Imperial Army had something the samurai didn't: rifles, artillery, resupply lines, and time. The rebels marched north and laid siege to Kumamoto Castle, a massive fortification garrisoned by Imperial troops. The plan was to take it, use it as a base, and march on Tokyo. The siege lasted 54 days. They couldn't crack it. Reinforcements poured in by steamship from the north, technology the samurai had no answer to. Slowly, painfully, the rebel force began to be pushed back south. Every week, more men killed, more ammunition spent. By summer, Saigō had gone from 40,000 men to a few thousand, then a few hundred. They were retreating toward Kagoshima, toward home. By September, he had 500 men left. 500 against the full weight of the Imperial Army. They made their final stand at Shiroyama, Castle Mountain, a forested hill overlooking Kagoshima Bay. The Imperial Army surrounded them with 30,000 soldiers. They spent days constructing trenches and barricades around the entire perimeter of the hill. They positioned warships in the bay. They brought in artillery. It was the most comprehensive killing machine assembled in Japanese history to that point. All of it pointed at one hill, holding 500 exhausted men. The government sent a message offering terms of surrender. Saigō didn't respond. On the night of September 23rd, the Imperial forces opened a massive artillery bombardment. For hours, shells rained down on the hill. When dawn broke on September 24th, the rebels charged. 500 men streaming down the hillside into 30,000 soldiers. Most were cut down almost immediately, but they kept coming. In the chaos of the final moments, Saigō, already badly wounded, turned to a trusted companion, and he asked to be helped to end his life with honor. He died on that hillside, not captured, not surrendering, on his own terms, in the way his code demanded. He was 49 years old. Here's where the story takes a turn that history rarely manages. The government that spent the entire year trying to kill Saigō Takamori, the emperor whose army crushed him on that hillside, pardoned him posthumously in 1891. His full honors were restored. His name was cleared. And the Japanese public, who had never really turned against him in the first place, embraced him as a national hero. A giant bronze statue of Saigō was erected in Ueno Park in Tokyo in 1898. It stands there today, one of the most visited landmarks in the city. The man who led a failed rebellion against the emperor, immortalized forever in the heart of the emperor's capital. Why? How? Because the Japanese people understood something that the government initially didn't. Saigō hadn't been fighting against Japan. He had been fighting for an idea of Japan, one built on honor, loyalty, integrity, and a code that said some things matter more than survival. He lost the battle, but he won something harder to win: the permanent respect of a nation. He became the symbol of what Japan feared it was losing in its rush to modernize, the conscience of a transformation that moved too fast to grieve what it left behind.
That's the end of this video. Would you like to see more of it? I hope so. Let me know in the comments.